Whether you're listening at home, at work, or anywhere, thanks for making ParaX part of your day. Your source for everything paranormal, ParaX.
And welcome back, everybody, right here to the Paranormal View on the ParaX Radio Network. I want to thank everyone with us tonight, those in the chat room and those listening from around the world. Tonight we have with us Barbara Duncan.
Hello, everyone.
And speaking of around the world, Barbara, where is all our listeners?
From the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, and Australia.
All right. The faraway land.
Yep.
I thought of, I would like to go to Australia, and then I get to thinking, that's just way too far.
A lot longer than an 8-hour train trip, yes.
Yes. And I don't think the trains run there.
Yeah.
And we got Jeffrey Gould with us.
Hello, hello.
And we have our wonderful guest, Don Allison.
Hello.
All right. Glad you hung on.
Okay, we need to talk about this now.
Okay.
Uh-oh.
And that is what I had hoped was the title of Don's new book would be Polly Wanna Ghost Box. And that is your parrot, which seems to be doing EVPs.
Yes, when you mentioned that, Barbara, last time I was on the show, EVP by Parrot, that's really been on my mind since then. It's quite intriguing.
Okay.
So has the little bird started saying things out of the ordinary?
Probably the most, EVP type thing he has done is at one point, for several days in a row at like 3:30 in the afternoon when I was home alone, I would be in my home office, the back corner of the house. I would hear what sounded like a young woman coughing across the hall into the living room. And it was like the first time I thought somebody was in the house, and I went down to see who was there. No one was there, but this happened several days in a row. But I knew I wasn't hearing things when one time I heard the cough and my parrot imitated it. He will imitate us coughing, very different than our actual cough, but kind of a ahem, ahem. So I knew that he was hearing it too.
Wow.
So is this something that is the parrot listening to things that it just simply not saying anything? Do you see it move its head a little bit like it is hearing stuff?
He, and I think I might have talked about this at least a little bit last time I was on, is he was sitting on the back of the recliner my wife was in, and he started playing peekaboo. The recliner's near the door to the dining room, and he started playing peekaboo with something in the dining room. And he doesn't just do that. You need to be responding to him for him to keep it up. He will sometimes initiate it, but he was, he'd bob his head 3 or 4 times, peeking around. He'd stop a little bit, and then he'd look, and he would do it again. And we were intrigued by that. So I got him on my finger, and he was just fixated on a corner of the room. And I walked back to the corner, and it was very noticeably colder than the rest of the room, and he was just transfixed with that corner, and you would see his head kind of follow, almost like someone moving in the corner. And
did he seem afraid of it?
He seemed intrigued by it. Now, one time he was frightened, and this happened to Diane. Again, she was in that same recliner. At that point, his cage was beside this door. Also, it's since been moved, but it's rather ironic that I had gone to bed just a few minutes before this, and I was upstairs, and I heard the heavy boot footsteps in our dining room heading toward the living room. That's not all that uncommon here. I didn't think that much of it until the next day. Diane said she was sitting watching TV, and all of a sudden the bird, he was in his cage, started going bonkers, screeching and screaming and flapping around. And he just does not do that in his cage or anywhere, really. Diane looked over, and basically a torso shape of a human, almost swirling black, she said, was between her and the cage coming through the door.
Really?
And she was dumbfounded. She looked down at the remote. She wanted to mute the TV, see if she could hear anything. And just in the time it took her to find that and look back up, it was gone. And immediately the bird settled down.
Huh.
But then the next day she told me what happened, and I said, "When was that?" And when she told me, it was exactly the same time I heard the footsteps approaching the room. But the bird is what alerted her to it.
And the parrot's name is what?
Is Rusty.
There you go.
So have you put a tape recorder out and see if Rusty actually communicates with anybody?
I have not. I have been very hesitant to actually investigate in the house. We have a very peaceful coexistence. Sometimes it's very active, and I just don't want to do anything to upset the apple cart, so to speak. Now, when we do renovation work, we tend to get activity, and about maybe 3 weeks or so ago, we had been doing some work, and one evening, I woke up and I had something I was trying to do on the computer, and the website was overloaded. It was actually the SBA website, and I woke up, it's 2:30, and I thought, a.m., so I thought, well, I'll go downstairs and see if I can get my information downloaded. And while I was doing that, I plainly heard what I thought was Diane coming down the stairs. And I heard the door open at the bottom of the stairs into the living room, and Rusty made a noise he'll often make if he's disturbed in the night, like if you go downstairs or maybe early in the morning, wake him up, kind of a And so I just assumed, oh, that's Diane. Well, maybe 10, 15 minutes later, I finished up. I went upstairs, and Diane was sound asleep in the bed. And I didn't hear anyone go back upstairs. And I just thought, well, okay, that's very typical of the things that happen here, but the bird does react to them. This was one case. I don't know if anything spoke to him. A few nights later, maybe a couple nights later, Diane had gone upstairs, and I was in the living room. She had left the door partially open, and I very clearly heard my name called, Don, almost a whispery female voice. And I said, I just thought it was Diane, on the stairs. And I said, what? When I didn't get a response, I looked out, and she was not on the stairs. No one was there. But the bird had reacted to the sound. He didn't say anything, but he looked in that direction. And I talked to Diane later, and she said she was exhausted. She said she fell asleep, almost immediately when she went to bed. So she was asleep when that happened. I have heard that same female voice in that location before, but that was the first time it called me by name. But the bird clearly hears these things going on.
Wow. Does the bird normally respond to you when you talk to it?
Quite often. He initiates conversations. He's extremely intelligent. He will have conversations with us. And a lot of it, he knows what's going on. Like if he sees me putting on my shoes, he knows I'm leaving. And he will say, what you doing? Putting on my shoes. What you doing? Putting on my shoes. And then when I get ready to leave, he sees me stand up, he'll go, miss you. And miss you. And then when I'm going out the door, bye, sweetie. It's just amazing. And he will curse if, I put him in the cage and that's not what he wants. He will let me know in no uncertain terms that that's
Really?
not what he wants.
Wow. Well, now, When you and your wife goes to Gettysburg, what do you do with the bird?
We have either a friend of ours who has had birds and knows how to deal with them, or our oldest son's girlfriend really likes animals, and she can work with him. He's very particular. He can be a little nippy to people he doesn't know. And the odd thing is, he usually will not talk to people he doesn't know. You have to be around him a while before he will react to you. But yeah, he seems to react to our spirits, which kind of leads me to believe that he must be familiar with them to some degree.
Wow.
Oh, when that bird starts talking about it, it's going to be amazing.
And I do anticipate that sometime, and there'll be times that he'll be sitting half asleep. We have a little stand with some food bowls on it so he can be out of his cage and still, have snacks. And sometimes he will just kind of out of the blue start talking without anything from us to initiate. So, I don't know. He seems to see things we don't see, because beyond my wife saw that torso. I once saw something came through my office. I heard the heavy leather booted footsteps, and when it passed between my desk and my computer desk and my other desk lamp, it cast a very human-shaped shadow on the wall. But yet I could see nothing, but I felt a very distinct coldness as those footsteps passed me.
Wow. Now, I know you don't want to investigate your house, but have you done research on the history of it as to who lived there?
Oh, yes, we have done very extensive research. And actually, I was talking on the phone to Tabby Cat Gash once, and she told me that you have Margaret with you. And then she proceeded to describe, she said, you will hear Margaret before you'll see her, or you'll smell her before you'll see her. And Margaret was an owner of the house who died in 1863. And we have heard the female footsteps, like the steps coming down the stairs, would be very in keeping with what we believe may be Margaret. We smell an old-fashioned like lilac perfume, and then a very old-fashioned liniment. And we tend to smell those in one of the upstairs bedrooms. But we often hear Margaret on the stairs or in the hallway. So we believe that may be one. And both Margaret and her husband was Henry. They died just like maybe 3 weeks apart, apparently, of a fever in September of 1863. And Margaret also then described, she said she wasn't getting a name, but she described somebody from the same time period, and it would match the description of Henry, her husband. But there were 4 Civil War soldiers, Union soldiers, who grew up here, 2 of them who did not make it home. 2 did survive.
The Civil War soldiers were living in the house?
They grew up here, yes. Their parents, it was their parents that died, Henry and Margaret. And let's see, 2 of the soldiers did make it. The children kept the house until 1869 and sold it. Prior to that, the Miller family, their last name was Miller, prior to the Millers, it was owned by a very prominent family. It was built by one of our earliest judges here, and his family was heavily involved in the Underground Railroad, and there's evidence that this house was an Underground Railroad stop. So it does have quite a history to it.
Yeah. That's amazing. Well, I can't wait to hear bird stories. Just because, someday that bird is going to, like I said, just start talking. How long have you lived in the house, Don?
We have lived here, I lose track, something like maybe 7 years. We've owned it longer, but it was in such terrible shape. We actually spent several years working on it just to get it in condition to live here.
Okay. So the bird has time yet.
Yeah, and he's, we got him, he was quite young when we moved here. We had gotten him just before we moved here. So I think we probably lived here 8 years because I think he may have turned 9 in May. So, yeah, he spent most of his life here. But, yeah, he obviously reacts to things. And the more I think about it, you will see him all of a sudden, like we will hear things we can't explain. It's quite frequent. Things will thump, or you'll hear what sounds like somebody moving, and he will react to those things. And other times he just reacts with no apparent reason.
Okay, but other than that, they leave him alone, right?
Yeah, they don't. He does not seem to be. The only time I've ever actually seen him afraid was, or known of him being afraid, was the time Diane saw the shadowy torso. And I have seen him like be startled and like maybe let out a kind of a squawk and fly around the room. But like say a bird flying by the window, sometimes we'll get the same response from him. But there are times he will do that on occasion with no apparent cause.
So what kind of parrot is he?
He is a green-cheeked conure.
Oh, wow.
So you think he would be nice to me if I came?
He would be leery of you, but then again, occasionally, like our son's girlfriend who watches him, the first time she met him, he flew onto her. Actually, he tried to bite her, but I think it was a bite of affection. He seemed to like her.
Huh.
But one of the funniest things, my brother-in-law was here one time, and Rusty knows him, but he's never really done anything with him. But he flew over onto Jean's chest. Jean was kind of leaned back in a chair, stuck his beak right at Jean's mouth, and every time Jean tried to talk, the parrot either said stop or shut up. It was hilarious.
Oh, that's a smart bird.
Tabby Cat said to tell you hi.
Hello, Tabby.
She's in the chat room.
Good.
When you first, matter of fact, there's a lot of people that doesn't know the tale about how you first come to find this house and how you got the house and things that started happening.
Yeah, I have watched the house since I was a kid. It's one of the very oldest houses in our county. It's, I think, the very first brick house constructed here. And I just always knew it was different. It wasn't like any other house. And as a kid, I've always been interested in history. But I watched it slowly deteriorate. But one experience I had, and this was many years before we purchased it, I had attended a nighttime meeting covering it for the newspaper. And on my way there, I just happened to notice that a car kind of popped up in the other lane. I realized, the house is on a ridge. And I had never really noticed that before. But it was neither here nor there, but it was still light out at that point. When I came home after the meeting, it was dark. There's a curve of the cemetery about less than half a mile away. I came around the curve. I'm doing, I don't usually drive exactly the speed limit. I was probably doing 60 or a little over. And all of a sudden, I felt this strong urge. I didn't hear voices or anything, just this strong urge to slow down. And I did. I probably slowed down to maybe 30, 35. I'm approaching this house, and all of a sudden, over that little ridge, popped two sets of headlights, one of them in my lane, passing the other one. Had I been going my full speed, I probably would have hit that car head on just about in front of this house. That has stayed with me. I trembled on the rest of my drive home and told my wife about it. Of course, I'd made no connection to the house at that time. But now that we live here, once we became interested in it and knew it was for sale, that has very much remained on my mind.
So
It almost felt as if it was preordained, maybe. I was supposed to live here. We were supposed to live here.
so when you decided to, did you go look at it before you bought it?
Well, actually, we didn't know it was a silent listing, but my son was looking for a house and he wanted a fixer-upper, so I came with him. And his girlfriend at the time was with him, and she had a little girl. And the real estate agent recommended that she not take the child inside because it was dangerous. There's actually planks laid across the living room floor because the floor was rotted from water damage. And my son concluded early on that it was more work. He didn't realize how bad a shape it was in. It was more work than he really wanted to tackle. The main reason we ended up going inside is because I'd always been fascinated with the house, and here's my chance to see it close up. And as I'm walking through and realizing this is like still original doors, door hardware, woodwork and whatnot from at the time. I didn't know it was as old as it is, but I was intrigued, and a little part of me thought this might be able to be saved. So when I told my wife about it, she said, well, yeah, I'll go with you and look at it again. And she was the same way. Maybe we could do this. So we ended up had 3 different contractors go through, look it over, give us estimates, what it needed, what it would cost, and it was feasible, so we ended up buying it. But it wasn't until I started to work in it that I realized that we weren't alone here.
Well, Don, do you feel that the house might have its own personality?
It has a very, very inviting, pleasant vibe. The very first thing that happened to me that really gave me a good feeling was the front porch was so rotted, what was left of it, that they'd actually laid an industrial skid over it to get into the house. So the very first thing I did was make a temporary repair with new floorboards so we could get in and out. And the very first day I did it after work. It wasn't a terribly difficult repair. I came back the next day, and there was a pine cone perched upright right smack in the middle of that porch repair. And I was just intrigued that there was a pine tree nearby, but there's no way that thing could have fallen and landed that way. And I couldn't imagine what would put it there, placed in the center. But the pine cones do have, especially from the Victorian era, kind of a feeling of goodwill and so forth, welcoming.
Oh, it's the raccoon welcome wagon.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, I thought could a raccoon, but it was not easy to balance. It was not. It's more of a taller, thinner type of pine cone, not one of those short, squat ones that would easily sit. It really intrigued me, and some of the Victorian signs on the corbels of the house are very welcoming, and even arrows pointing inward, kind of directing the love inside, is the Victorian symbolism of that. So it has a very good vibe, Barbara. I think a very good personality.
That's great.
Very.
I mean, I could assume that some people might, think it's a Munster type thing, but pine cones, especially on wreaths, for example, that was supposed to be a very welcoming thing. So,
And I thought it was interesting of when you would be doing some of the remodeling. How much remodeling did you do before you guys actually moved in?
We had to do a lot, and actually we pretty much returned it as much to original as we could. I mean, like upstairs, the middle bedroom, the water damage had destroyed about 2/3 of the original floor. But luckily there was a barn on the ancestral property that was coming down, so we were actually able to get the floorboards from the haymow of the barn were the correct thickness and were the same wood that was used in the original house, native timber hardwood. rough sawn, so I was able to recreate the floor. I just used a router and a jig to do the tongue and groove, and I'd never know it's not the original, those sorts of things. But it took heavy. We totally rewired it. We figured the wiring was from just after World War II. We had actually a modern geothermal furnace put in. Luckily, our contractor has an old house himself, worked with us to hide the ductwork and be very unobtrusive. But we did several years of work before it was fit to live in, totally replumbed, all that.
Now, I thought it was interesting that when you would be in there working, you would be listening to the radio. And apparently whatever was living there didn't like what you was listening to.
Did not like rock music. And yeah, my favorite story, and it's one that really got my attention, that there's something intelligent here. Working one night, we didn't have power turned on to the place. We hadn't redone the wiring yet, but I was cutting floorboards with a table saw for the upstairs floor, cutting them to length, and I had a radio. I had a generator running outside. It was after dark. The generator's powering the saw, the lights, and the radio. The radio kept turning off whenever a particularly loud, raucous classic rock station came on. And after the third time, this was the first time I ever did this, I spoke out loud. I'm here by myself. I just said, look, leave the radio alone. I like this music. I don't want to have to go over there and keep turning the radio on. Don't mess with the radio. And I turned it back on, start sawing. A few more songs played. Well, the song, and I clearly remember this, Elton John, Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting came on. And the radio did not turn off. The generator outside turned off, was shut off. I just started laughing. There I am in the dark, a victim of this sense of humor, so to speak. But that one made an impression on me, and that's when I started like, okay, something's going on here, and I really need to start looking into this.
Wow.
So are they still music critics? Do you have to go outside to listen to hard rock?
What I have found is they tend not to mess too much with that anymore. It seems to be with that now that I'm using radios that plug in or CD players that plug in, it doesn't seem to have the ability to deal with those. It was battery powered, flashlights, radios, things like my wife and I were working actually outside on the north part of the house with a battery powered radio, and it kept changing from, she had on a country station, it kept changing to a Bowling Green State University men's basketball game. Well, they are the arch rivals to my University of Toledo team, but we kept switching it back. We kept switching it to other stations. I think about a dozen times we changed it to either our original or another station, and each time within 30 seconds it was back on the BGSU game. We left it on the game. Once the game ended, we put it back on the original station, and it did not change again. But I would have stations change inside, again on a battery-powered radio, to Cleveland Indians baseball from a rock station. Again, I'm a Tigers fan. I don't like the Indians. So. Just very intelligent things. And when our neighbor actually did our heating and air, and he had a key and was checking things out to be sure it was working properly, and he came in, he said one night, and the radio was on a baseball game, and it was a Cleveland Indians game. So not only he had whatever it was turned the radio on after I left, but it had changed the station. And Rob said there was a very kind of a heavy feeling in the air, like he wasn't alone. He said it was kind of creepy.
Wow.
Okay.
But obviously a sports fan.
Yes. And actually, if I'm not mistaken, it was Tabby Cat that said that she was getting the vision of somebody maybe older and maybe the 1960s who was not a rock, seemed not to like rock and roll and seemed to like old country. And I can say I'll sometimes, I grew up around some of that music. I'll sometimes throw on some Hank Williams Sr. or something. I've never had it mess with any of that music, so maybe that is what's going on.
Well, I got a question from Tabby Cat, and she said that she keeps getting something about a chair, something that moves like either an office chair or a rocking chair, and wanted to know if you knew anything or what it meant.
That is quite significant, and it has a somewhat of a connection to this house, but we bought it from two brothers, the house. They grew up here, and their grandfather had built a house just down the road on the ancestral farm, and Ken, his brother has since passed, but Ken, we asked him about activities in the house because we had actually come here and done a little bit before the formal closing. He was easy to work with, and we'd had a little bit of experience and had the former occupant tell us it was haunted. So we asked him at the closing, and he said no. He said, we didn't. We grew up here, but he said the house down the road that he was renting out, he said right after his mother died, he drove by, and there was a security light on, and he could see the rocking chair that she used to sit in the front room rocking by itself.
Wow.
And she seems to be a presence here as well. It was her ancestral home, actually, Ken's mother, and she was a beautician, and she actually ran a beauty shop out of one of the rooms. And one of the things left behind was a very old iron hair dryer from maybe the 40s or 50s. And one time, the first night I ever spent in the house, my cousin from Alabama was up, wanted to spend the night here. He had an active house in Alabama, but I said, nothing will happen. So we're sleeping in the dining room. That hair dryer was in the room, and we were awakened in the middle of the night by that hair dryer being smacked very hard, and then the radio coming on by itself.
How long was the house?
Oh, I'm sorry, Barbara.
No. How long was the house vacant for?
Not terribly long, which shocked me because it was in such terrible shape, but apparently the gentleman had moved out less than a year before we bought it. How he lived here, I don't know, but apparently the furnace quit working, and he got portable heaters, and finally the well quit working, and that's when he moved out.
Huh. Wow.
Okay.
But he told us, and so he saw us working outside when we first actually hadn't even signed the papers yet, and he told us that the house was haunted, and some of the experiences he shared with us we have encountered ourselves.
Wow.
But that's not what drove him out. What drove him out was the state of the house.
Was the state of the house. That's correct. Yeah, it didn't seem to bother him a bit. As a matter of fact, I found out that he actually held seances here.
Really?
He was a teacher, a music teacher, school teacher, and a fellow teacher who knew him told us about being here for seances.
Wow.
And she saw an old farmer in overalls, a hat, and a white shirt that sounded to me like probably early 20th century. But she said he was actually leaning against a tree watching us talk outside. But the ironic part is my grandson on 2 different occasions saw the very same thing, and we never told him about it. And yet he described the same thing she had described.
Wow.
So these seances that got held, were they standard with a medium or a Ouija board sort of thing?
Apparently there was a medium present, and I didn't talk at length with his friend John, who lived here. He's now gone, but his friend who had been here said they did get apparently a young woman to come through. And apparently more than one spirit, but that seemed to be the primary one.
Well, at least nothing seems to be bad, so they're just friendly and living with you.
Exactly, and that's why I don't provoke. One thing we did do, and actually, Barbara, you had suggested this, if I'm remembering right, the first time I was on your show, you had suggested getting one of those, like almost like a bed of nails, that will leave like a handprint, or you can put your face print in it.
Yeah.
Well, I told my son about what you suggested. He found an antique metal one. And you said to put it in front of my computer because I had a touch screen at the time, and it would often, if I left the room, I'd come back and programs would be opened up. Well, I put that toy on my desk nearby the first night, and nothing happened. I put it in front of my computer the next night, went to bed, and when I came downstairs the next day, there was a small child's handprint in those nails.
Really?
Oh, cool.
Wow. Yes, that would be. Now,
Well, no, it simply means they could also react with things, and that's neat that it'll leave a handprint,
uh-huh.
And she's been seen by, and I think I've shared before, people delivering a washer and dryer. The one gentleman saw a very clear little girl apparition. Another woman also has seen the little girl here. But we hear often at night, we'll hear tiny footsteps around the perimeter of our room, and particularly a necklace stand that my wife has, we'll actually hear, and we've actually seen these move on their own. As if she's attracted to them. And also a door of a wardrobe. They have an antique wardrobe, and it will, like someone is moving it. And generally that doesn't often happen, and then when it does, it's almost always in conjunction with hearing the other things.
Wow. Well, just likes to snoop and play.
Yeah, just she and a medium stopped me at an event. I didn't know her, she didn't know me, and she told me that she stopped me. She's talking to someone else. I walked by and she says, "Sir, you have a little girl." And pardon me, I'm thinking, nah, I have two sons, and a grandson, but no girls. But she said, "No, I'm sorry, with you." And then she proceeded to describe the same thing that the gentleman had seen. And I even, I asked her, well, why does she hang around? Why doesn't she cross over? She likes you. And she even said she's always in the background, always keeps her distance, and very shy. And we also will hear her out in the hallway, upstairs hallway. We've even put a motion detector light out there, and it will go off on occasion, and often in conjunction with hearing the steps.
Now, you had another event or a thing that happened. There was something that was kind of like hidden in your basement, and something led you to find out what it was.
Yes, it was the same conversation I was having with Tabby Cat when she told me about Margaret, and then she described what we believed to be Henry, but she said he seemed to be in like maybe 1850s clothing, but he was swinging a hammer. She said it's not a carpenter's hammer, but she described a machinist's hammer. Well, Henry owned the Bryan woolen mills in Bryan, and the wool carting operation machinery was on the farm. But she said, and then Kat described the room. She described one of my large windows. She said there's a large bush outside of it. Yeah, she said, and then there's a window below that. Yeah. She said, well, that's where he is, and he is calling attention to something near that lower window, either inside or outside of it, either something he wants you to find there, or something that has been found there that he wants you to know is connected with him. Well, my grandson, early on when we had the house, found the barrel, a military flintlock pistol barrel, just the barrel of a gun beneath that window in the basement. So
Wow.
the gun would be prior to probably, I think they quit making those in like 1845 maybe. So this gun would be of the correct period for Henry to have owned it or had a connection to it.
Huh.
As a matter of fact, I have the barrel sitting just about 2 feet away from me right now in that windowsill.
Wow.
That was an appropriate place for it.
So it's pretty interesting how all these things happen, and you pretty much have learned to interact with them. And nothing is being mischievous to where it's scary or anything like that. It's just them living in the house.
Yeah, and it has been irritating in that things sometimes come up missing that we know we did not move, and most often we will find them, but not always. Some things have totally disappeared and never been found.
Wow.
That is odd.
Yes, it is.
And not unprecedented.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, and things moving are intriguing. I was in the basement, 2 weeks ago tonight, at the Sanders farm, Terry and Amanda Thomas. They actually host paranormal tours there, haunted trails. But I was in the basement with a gentleman, and we had been investigating throughout the night. And then they have a toy train that one of the spirits seems to be a young black boy that has a connection there. And he actually calls me by name and interacts with me. I'm kind of a regular there when I'm in town. But the toy wooden train, something like they would have had in the time period, they have had it moved before, but the gentleman I was with, it's for an engine and 3 cars. We had them side by side in order, and we're in the dark. And we were getting a lot of EVP readings, or not EVP, but I'm sorry, EMF readings with a K2 meter near the train. But we were in the dark. Well, we got to looking, and here one of the cars was moved so that it was perpendicular to the other ones, where they had been parallel. And that had happened while we were talking and conversing. With Jackson it's the name that the spirit will give, but he loves toys, and for some reason he wasn't talking with me that night, and I finally said, well, Jackson, this is Don, why aren't you talking? We were using a Phasma box, and he finally said like, okay, or yeah. I said, well, good, well, thanks for interacting with me, Jackson. And he said, bless your heart. And that was about the time that train, the car was moved. That was pretty moving.
Wow.
You realize that wasn't a compliment, right?
Oh boy.
Yeah, in the South, bless your heart is not necessarily a compliment.
No, it's sort of like a verbal, I'm patting you on the head, you sad, stupid person. Apparently,
a light blow off.
Yeah. Apparently, James Corden was doing one of his shows, and he indicated he was in the South, and this woman, he had done something, and this woman had said, oh, bless your heart, and he thought it was one of the most beautiful things in the world. Well, 2 of the guests he had, I think Ellen DeGeneres and somebody else, who were from the South, saying, no, that was not her being polite or saying anything beautiful. She was saying you were very sad and very foolish.
Now, I know you've been to Gettysburg quite a few times when we go over to have our event with everybody coming. And you ended up starting to buy equipment and stuff to where you can actually investigate.
Yes.
Have you thought about looking around Ohio at different places?
I have investigated. We actually have a have a grain elevator, an old granary that is very active. As a matter of fact, it was featured on the Travel Channel, America's Most Terrifying Places, just last season.
I seen that with you.
And I was lucky enough to be. They had me as the historian, but I've investigated there a number of times, and there's one spirit there who is quite a smart aleck, and he loves to insult and swear at you. He was making bird whistle noises once, and very interesting. And he, again, I don't see him as malevolent, but just rather obnoxious.
Wow.
But yeah, when I bought an SB7 spirit box, and when I first had it, I didn't want to try it in the house, so I did take it down to cemetery near our house. A gentleman buried there had murdered a librarian in town back in the 1940s. He was a World War II veteran. He came back mentally disturbed, but he had recently died. And I was at his gravesite, and I made the mistake, and he was later released from prison, and I had to interact with him, and always was kind of creeped out by him. But I said something, James, are you here? And I got an answer. I immediately turned off the box and walked away. But yeah, and the library is actually his spirit and the spirit of the slain librarian have come through there, and I have heard them myself. I've investigated that a number of times.
Wow.
And there are some other buildings here in Bryan I've investigated that are interesting.
Wow. I might have to take a trip up to Bryan.
Yeah, I would love to have you here sometime.
Well, now, is the COVID bad up there, or your county's fairly well safe?
Our county is the lowest level yellow, but our cases are rising, and we have 2 red counties adjoining us,
right,
and an orange one adjoining us, and then just over from that orange one are a row of red ones. So it's coming our way.
Wow. Well, if people, would do the right thing and protect themselves and not run around without the masks and all the other good stuff, it would be a whole lot better. Yeah.
I agree, Henry. I think the science is clear. The masks work. I felt much more comfortable in Gettysburg than I have around here because Pennsylvania has a mask order and everyone wore them. They just did. They respected. They did their distance. I did a book signing there. They were very good. Everyone wore masks. The Heritage Center there set up a hand sanitizing station right by my table. The only I didn't really have to touch anything that others are touching. If people bought a book, I would sign it and hand it to them. So, but we do have the mask order finally in Ohio, and I think that's a good thing. As much as I hate wearing them, we need them.
Right. At least for a while, until they get a vaccine. And that's probably the only thing that's actually going to knock this thing down to where it's back into like safe levels.
Yeah, I agree.
And speaking of book signings, let's talk a little bit about your new book, which is not paranormal, and that is What's on My Mind, Volume 2?
Yeah, it's just I do a weekly column. I'm retired. I was a daily newspaper editor for much of my career and a writer before that, news writer. But I do a weekly column for the Bryan Times newspaper. It also is my blog now. So if you're interested, it's posted weekly at fadedbanner.com. But some of my favorite columns I've done, actually 2 full-size books of some of my favorites, and then I did a very brief one just of some of my columns during the COVID-19 situation. And it's fun. I enjoy the column, and I've through the years I've done it for decades. I've gotten quite a following. I enjoy the feedback from people, You know, good or bad, if I'm at the grocery store, more often than not, someone will see me and comment on, one of my recent columns. So I find that gratifying.
But I find it interesting because you were talking about the radio and music, and there was one short story in there about driving with Leonard Skinner.
Yeah, yeah, that's the old Southerner in me. I've been a Skinner fan since they first broke on the scene.
All right.
Okay, well, we're going to forgive you for the Freebird thing, but that's okay.
Well, I'll be kind and I will not sing. How's that?
No. All right. Our time is just about time to run out. And what I'll do is I'm going to give Don a little bit of time to tell you about his books, how you can get them, and his website and how you can contact him. So go ahead, and after you get done, just stay on. Don't run away, and we'll talk with you after the show.
Okay, sounds good. Well, yeah, you can get the books in about any bookstore. If they're not stocked, they can order them for you. They're available at my website, www.fadedbanner.com. You can read my column there. Thanks, Barbara, for mentioning my newest book on the columns, volume 1 and 2 of those. I Met a Ghost at Gettysburg. I met more ghosts at Gettysburg. And you can check out my paranormal side of things on imetaghost.com. is the website for that, and those two sites are linked, and you can go back and forth. Or Amazon carries all my books as well, so you can get them there as well.
All right, and I want to thank you for being with us tonight. Next week we will have with us Ohio Jeff. His name's Jeff Wilson. He's in the chat room. And we'll be talking about his third book, Ohio Legends #3. And you can get those also a lot of different places. You can just type in Jeff Wilson, Ohio Legends, and you can see his site. Or you can, I believe, his books are even on Amazon, I believe. If not, he'll let us know. Anyway, great for Don being with us. As always, I am glad to be able to talk with him. We always have a great time when we do meet up in Gettysburg, because we get to do a little investigating, and then afterwards we all end up sitting around and just talking about different things, and having a few refreshments, you might say. So again, great talking with you. Now, Barbara, you got anything before we have to run?
Wash your hands, wear a mask, and back off.
And back off?
6 feet.
6 feet. Yeah.
Good advice.
Yeah, it's good advice. And I'm anytime I have to go out somewhere, I've always got my mask. And yes, I do not get close to others. And they just started the the order to where everybody has to wear a mask. And I would go to stores, because I'd have to go to a hardware store to get stuff for the house. And you might see half wearing a mask and half wasn't. They just didn't care. And I would always stay kind of like away from them. So
Just time to back off.
yeah, back off. Yeah. Put the little cross up. Back off. All right. Jeff, you got anything?
Nope. I'm still working on getting the YouTube channel with previous stuff and shows, so people can watch listen to our shows on YouTube instead of trying to find them online or something.
Sounds good. We've been working on that, and there's probably a lot of them I'm going to have to redo. So, because I got a whole bunch of old ones. So, all right.
Well, I started with back when I lost my job.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, we're going to have to run. We will see you next week at the same time. I want to thank everybody for taking the time to be with us, and hope everybody has a great weekend. So, till then, this is Henry Foister,
Jeffrey Gould,
And Barbara Duncan.
So, see you next week at the same time. So, good night, everybody. You've been listening to the Paranormal View on the ParaX Radio Network. Join us again next week at the same time for more of the Paranormal View.